The mess hall of the UES Dakota buzzed with conversation as the evening shift gathered for dinner. Commander Jake Morrison sat at his usual table, watching his crew enjoy their meal. After 6 months in deep space, they had settled into a comfortable routine. The mission was simple enough: survey the Kepler 442 system for new colony worlds, and map any interesting discoveries along the way. Dr. Lisa Carter walked into the mess hall carrying a datapad and looking excited. She was the ship's xenoarchaeologist, a quiet woman in her 40s who spent most of her time studying alien ruins and ancient artifacts. Tonight, she looked like she had something important to share. "Commander Morrison," she called out, approaching his table. "I need to show you something. The artifacts we found on the last 3 worlds, they all have the same warnings." Jake looked up from his dinner and smiled. "Warnings about what, Doc?" "About something they call the Pale Demons. Ancient enemies that hunt in the darkness between stars." Lisa's voice was serious, but Jake could see several crew members at nearby tables starting to grin. Lieutenant Kevin Ross, a young pilot with bright red hair, laughed out loud. "Pale Demons? What is this, a horror movie?" "Let me guess," said Ensign Amy Stone from across the room. "They also warned about monsters under the bed and things that go bump in the night." The mess hall filled with chuckles as more crew members joined in. Navigation Officer Paul Grant stood up and made spooky hand gestures. "Beware, brave space travelers. The scary aliens are coming to get you." Lisa frowned and activated her datapad, projecting holographic images of stone tablets and metal inscriptions. "This isn't funny. These warnings appear on 17 different worlds across 4 star systems. Civilizations that never met each other all describe the same threat. Maybe they all watched the same scary movie," joked Tony Hayes from the communications station. The crew laughed again. Jake studied the projected images. The alien writing was beautiful but strange, with symbols that seemed to twist and move when he looked at them directly. "What exactly do these warnings say, Doc?" Lisa cleared her throat and began reading from her translations. "They speak of hunters from the void who feed on the light of living minds, silent ships that appear when worlds grow too bright with knowledge. The pale demons who turn thriving civilizations into empty graveyards. Sounds like every monster story ever told," said Chief Engineer Nicole Brooks. "Ancient people always made up scary tales to explain things they didn't understand. But the details match perfectly," Lisa insisted. "They all describe the same ships, the same methods of attack. One inscription says they appear when a species reaches a certain level of technology. Another warns that conventional weapons are useless against them." Security Chief Matt Rodriguez looked thoughtful. "Could be a real threat that these civilizations faced. Maybe pirates or raiders using advanced technology?" "Pirates don't destroy entire civilizations without taking anything," Lisa replied. "According to these texts, the Pale Demons leave nothing behind but empty cities. No bodies, no survivors, just silence." Amy Stone made exaggerated, frightened noises. "Oh no, the space ghosts are going to get us. Quick, someone check under my bunk for monsters." The laughter grew louder. Even Jake found himself smiling at his crew's reaction. After months in the cold emptiness of space, it was good to see them in high spirits. "Come on, Doc. You have to admit this sounds like typical ancient superstition. Every old civilization has stories about terrible enemies and divine punishments. The mathematical precision of their stellar coordinates isn't superstition," Lisa said firmly. "These warnings include exact locations where attacks occurred, star charts that match our current galactic maps, technical specifications that shouldn't exist in civilizations that barely invented the wheel. Maybe the space demons taught them advanced math," suggested Paul Grant, making more spooky gestures. "Right before they ate their brains." The mess hall erupted in laughter again. Several crew members began making jokes about filing reports on ghost sightings and requesting extra weapons to fight imaginary monsters. The ship's AI system chimed in with its mechanical voice. "Mythological content detected. No tactical relevance identified." Even the computer was laughing at the idea in its own way. Jake stood up and patted Lisa on the shoulder. "I appreciate the research, Doc, but I think you're reading too much into this. Ancient people created scary stories to explain natural disasters, plagues, and wars they didn't understand. These pale demons are probably just their way of describing comets, solar flares, or hostile neighbors." "But Commander, look," Jake interrupted gently. "If there really were space monsters wiping out entire civilizations, don't you think we would have found some evidence by now? Wreckage, bodies, something concrete? All we have are old stories carved in stone. Lisa looked around the mess hall at the grinning faces of the crew. The evidence is the silence itself. 17 worlds with signs of advanced civilization that suddenly went quiet. No war damage, no natural disasters, just emptiness. Could be anything, said Matt Rodriguez. Disease, resource depletion, civil war. Civilizations collapse all the time for normal reasons. Normal reasons don't leave behind warnings about pale demons, Lisa muttered. Kevin Ross stood up and made a mock announcement. Attention all crew members. Be on the lookout for spooky space monsters. If you see any pale demons, please report them to the comedy department. The laughter was so loud now that it echoed off the metal walls. Jake watched his crew enjoying themselves and decided this was exactly what they needed. Morale was important on long missions, and fear of imaginary threats wouldn't help anyone. Doc, I respect your work, but I think you're letting your imagination run wild, Jake said. These are just old stories. Myths and legends that got passed down through generations of scared primitives. There's nothing out there hunting us. Lisa gathered her datapad and looked disappointed. I hope you're right, Commander. But what if you're wrong? Then we'll laugh about it over dinner, Jake replied, which got another round of chuckles from the crew. As Lisa left the mess hall, the laughter followed her into the corridor. The crew continued making jokes about space monsters and ancient demons long into the evening. Jake went to bed that night feeling good about his crew's spirits and confident in their mission. He had no way of knowing that their laughter was being heard by something in the darkness between stars. Something that had been waiting patiently for humanity to venture far enough from home. Something that found their mockery interesting. The pale demons had been sleeping for a long time, but laughter had a way of waking the dead. 3 weeks had passed since the crew's laughter echoed through the Dakota's corridors. The ship had moved deeper into the Kepler 442 system, cataloging planets and moons with mechanical efficiency. The jokes about pale demons had faded into memory, replaced by routine reports and standard procedures. Jake Morrison was reviewing supply manifests in his quarters when the emergency alert sounded. The sharp, urgent tone cut through the ship's normal hum like a knife. He was on his feet and heading for the bridge before the second alert finished. Report, he called out as he entered the command center. Tony Hayes looked up from his communication station, his face pale. Commander, we're receiving a distress beacon from Research Station Omega on Kepler 442c. The signal is weak and badly damaged. Put it through the speakers. Static filled the bridge, mixed with fragments of panicked voices. Impossible readings. Something big coming from deep space. Energy signatures don't match anything in our database. Oh God, they're so old. So hungry. The transmission cut to silence. Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach, but he pushed it aside. How long since the last communication from Omega Station? 4 days ago, sir. They sent a routine status report. Everything was normal. Could be equipment failure, suggested Paul Grant from the navigation console. Or maybe pirates raided the station. Jake nodded, though something about the fear in those voices bothered him. Set course for Kepler 442c, maximum speed. Hayes, try to raise them on all frequencies. The Dakota's engines thrummed with increased power as the ship changed direction. Jake watched the stars shift on the main screen and tried to ignore the unease growing in his chest. Research stations went silent sometimes. It happened, usually for boring reasons like power failures or communication breakdowns. 2 hours later, Amy Stone called out from her sensor station. Commander, I'm picking up multiple contacts in orbit around 442c. Unknown vessel configurations. Jake leaned forward in his command chair. How many ships? 6. No, 7 contacts. They're big, sir. Larger than anything in our fleet database. Could be alien merchants, suggested Kevin Ross, though his usual humor was absent. Maybe they're trading with the research station. Amy's fingers danced over her controls as she refined the sensor readings. Sir, these ships, they're old. Really old. The hull materials don't match anything we've seen before. And the energy signatures are weird. Define weird. They're not using fusion, antimatter, or any power source we recognize. The readings suggest something completely different. Something that shouldn't be possible according to our physics. Jake felt the crew's mood shifting around him. The casual confidence of the past weeks was evaporating, replaced by a tension that made the air feel thick. Chief Adams, what's your analysis? Rachel Adams, the ship's science officer, studied her instruments with growing concern. The vessels appear to be constructed from an unknown metallic compound. They're absorbing our sensor sweeps instead of reflecting them. It's like they're designed to hide from scanning attempts. Stealth ships? More than that, sir. It's as if they exist partially outside normal space. Our instruments can detect them, but barely. And the age readings are impossible. Some of these materials appear to be millions of years old. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of instruments. Jake stared at the main screen, watching the distant contacts move in slow predatory orbits around the planet below. Attempt to establish communication. Tony Hayes nodded and opened all standard frequencies. Unknown vessels, this is the UES Dakota. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions in this system. The response came immediately, but not through the communication system. It came directly into their minds. A voice like whispers in a tomb spoke inside Jake's head, and he knew everyone else was hearing it too. The words carried the weight of ages and the cold of deep space between stars. How amusing. Another young species so far from home. It has been epochs since we encountered such optimistic prey. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. Around the bridge, crew members grabbed their heads as the alien presence pressed against their thoughts. Amy Stone's nose began to bleed. The voice continued, filled with ancient hunger and cruel amusement. We are the Veilnith. We have sailed the darkness between galaxies since before your star was born. We have harvested the light of 1,000 civilizations, and their screams still echo in our ship's halls. Who? What do you want? Jake managed to speak through the psychic pressure. Want? We do not want, little creature. We take, we feed. Your species has grown bright with knowledge and ripe with life force. You will make excellent additions to our collection. Images flooded their minds. Vast ships filled with preserved consciousnesses. Entire civilizations reduced to energy patterns. Planets stripped of every living thought and left as empty husks. The crew saw flashes of the Veilnith themselves, pale ancient beings with eyes like dying stars and fingers that could reach into minds and pull out souls. The research station, Jake gasped. What did you do to them? They provided a delicious appetizer. Their terror was exquisite. But we require more substantial nourishment. Your ship will serve nicely, and then we shall visit your homeworld. Earth, is it not? Such a pretty blue marble full of bright minds to consume. Matt Rodriguez struggled to speak through the mental intrusion.
Why are you telling us this?
The laughter that filled their heads was worse than screams. Because fear adds such wonderful flavor to the harvest. The more terrified you become, the sweeter your life force tastes when we drain it away. Jake forced himself to stand, fighting against the alien presence crushing down on his thoughts. We won't let you reach Earth. You cannot stop what has already begun, little commander. We have been patient, waiting for your species to spread across the stars. Now you have delivered yourselves to us, far from help, ripe for collection. Your death will be the first note in humanity's final song. The presence withdrew from their minds like ice water being pulled from their skulls. The crew gasped and collapsed back into their chairs, several with blood streaming from their noses. On the main screen, the alien ships began moving with deadly purpose. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around them, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. They moved without visible engines, gliding through space like sharks through dark water. Jake wiped blood from his lip and looked around at his crew. The laughter that had filled these same corridors weeks ago seemed like a memory from another lifetime. All hands to battle stations. Send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them... He paused, remembering Lisa Carter's warnings and his own dismissive response. Tell them the old tales were true. The Dakota's alarm systems wailed as the ship prepared for battle. But Jake knew their weapons were designed to fight human pirates and asteroid debris, not ancient horrors from the spaces between stars. The pale demons had awakened, and they were hungry. The Dakota's engines roared as Jake ordered full retreat from Kepler 4He42C. The alien ships, the Veilnith vessels, followed at a distance, like cats playing with wounded prey. They made no attempt to catch the human ship, content to let fear do their work for them. How fast can we get back to Earth? Jake asked Paul Grant. The navigation officer's hands shook as he worked his controls. At maximum speed, 6 weeks. But Commander, those ships could catch us easily if they wanted to. They're not trying to catch us, said Rachel Adams quietly. They want us to spread the word. They want humanity to know what's coming. Jake felt sick as he realized she was right. The Veilneth weren't just hunters. They were artists of terror, and fear was part of their feeding process. Lisa, he called over the intercom. Report to the bridge immediately. Dr. Lisa Carter arrived within minutes, her face grave but not surprised. She had heard the psychic contact along with everyone else, felt the ancient malice pressing against her thoughts. You believe the warnings now, Commander? Yes, Jake said simply. Tell me everything you know about these things. Lisa activated her datapad and began projecting the alien inscription she had studied. According to the texts, the Veilneth are older than most galaxies. They feed on conscious thought and life force, using the energy to power their ships and extend their own existence. They've been dormant for thousands of years, waiting for new civilizations to reach deep space. What happened to the species that left these warnings? Most were completely destroyed. Their worlds became empty tombs, all life drained away. But a few managed to fight back successfully. The problem is their methods are described in symbolic language that's hard to translate. Matt Rodriguez studied the alien writing with professional interest. Any mention of effective weapons? Not conventional ones. The successful resistance efforts seem to have used something called chaos patterns and unpredictable harmonics. I'm not sure what that means in practical terms. Amy Stone looked up from her sensor station, her face pale. Commander, I'm reading massive energy discharges from the direction of Earth. Something's happening in our home system. Jake's heart stopped. Put it on screen. The main display showed a long-range view of Earth's solar system. Brilliant flashes of light marked the positions of human colonies and defense stations. As they watched, the lights began going out one by one. Mars colony has gone silent, Tony Hayes reported, his voice barely a whisper. Luna Station is not responding. The Jupiter mining platforms. Nothing. Dear God, breathed Paul Grant. They're already there. Jake gripped his command chair as the terrible truth sank in. While the Dakota had been exploring distant systems, the Veilneth had launched their main attack on humanity's home. The encounter at Kepler 442c had been just a scouting party, a way to identify and terrify potential resistance. Sir, Amy called out, I'm detecting similar energy patterns throughout human space. The colonies at Alpha Centauri, the research stations at Wolf 359, they're all under attack simultaneously. Jake forced himself to think despite the crushing weight of despair. How many people? 12 billion in the home system alone, Rachel Adams whispered. Hundreds of millions more in the outer colonies. The bridge fell silent as the crew absorbed the magnitude of the disaster. Everything they had ever known, everyone they had ever loved, was being systematically destroyed by ancient horrors from the dark between stars. Commander, Lisa said suddenly, her voice urgent. There's something else in the warnings. Something about species that fought back successfully. What about them? They all had one thing in common. They were described as mad or unpredictable by other civilizations. The inscriptions suggest that logic and conventional strategy are useless against the Veilneth. Only divine madness and beautiful chaos could break their patterns. Matt Rodriguez frowned. That doesn't make sense. Military strategy is based on logic and planning. How can madness be effective? I don't know, Lisa admitted. But one inscription is very specific. It says, when reason fails, let the wild heart guide the blade. When order crumbles, dance with chaos. The ancient hunger cannot digest what it cannot predict. Jake stared at the alien writing, trying to understand. The symbols seemed to shift and move, forming new patterns that made his head hurt. Nicole, he called to the chief engineer over the intercom. What's the status on our weapon systems? Fully operational, sir. But based on sensor readings from the alien ships, our weapons won't even scratch their hulls. There has to be something we can do, Kevin Ross said desperately. We can't just hide while Earth burns. That's when Amy Stone made a discovery that changed everything. Commander, I'm picking up a strange pattern in the Veilneth attack formations. They're not random, they're following mathematical sequences. Perfect geometric arrangements, optimal energy distribution curves. Everything they do is based on advanced calculations. Rachel Adams leaned over Amy's shoulder to study the readings. She's right. Their movement patterns, attack timing, even their feeding methods, it's all mathematically precise. They operate like a perfect machine. Jake felt something click in his mind. What's the most unpredictable thing in the universe? Random quantum fluctuations? Suggested Paul. No, Jake said slowly. Humans being stupid. The bridge crew stared at him. Sir, think about it. We're the species that invented professional wrestling and reality TV. We're the people who put pineapple on pizza and argued about it for decades. We do things that make no logical sense because we feel like it. Lisa's eyes widened as she understood. The chaos patterns mentioned in the warnings. They're not talking about random events. They're talking about deliberate irrationality. What if that's our weapon? Jake continued, his mind racing. What if the reason other species failed is because they tried to fight logically? But humans, we're famous for doing completely insane things when we're cornered. Matt Rodriguez looked skeptical. You're suggesting we fight million-year-old space demons with stupidity? Not stupidity, unpredictability. The Valeneth are perfect calculating machines. But what happens when you feed impossible data into a perfect system? It breaks, Nicole's voice came through the intercom. Commander, you're talking about weaponizing human irrationality. Jake stood up and looked around at his crew. Hayes, send a message to every human ship in the galaxy. Tell them to ignore military doctrine and standard tactics. Tell them to fight like humans, messy, chaotic, and completely insane. Sir, that goes against everything we know about space combat. Good, Jake replied, because everything we know just got 12 billion people killed. It's time to try something different. As the Dakota continued its lonely flight through space, Jake began formulating the most ridiculous military strategy in human history. If the ancient warnings were correct, humanity's greatest weakness might be their greatest strength. The Valeneth had never encountered a species crazy enough to win through losing, to find victory in defeat, to laugh in the face of extinction. They were about to learn why humans were different. Jake Morrison stood in the Dakota's briefing room, looking at the holographic display showing what remained of human space. Red dots marked systems that had gone silent under Valeneth attack. Green dots showed the scattered human ships that had managed to escape or were too far away to be immediately targeted. The green dots were pitifully few. 37 ships, he said aloud, out of humanity's entire fleet. We have 37 vessels still capable of fighting against an enemy that just destroyed our entire civilization in less than a week, added Matt Rodriguez grimly, which is why we're going to do something. Completely insane, Jake replied. He activated his data pad and began outlining his plan. Lisa, you said the successful species fought using chaos patterns. I think I know what that means. Dr. Carter leaned forward, studying Jake's rough sketches. You want to coordinate the remaining human ships in completely random attack formations? Not random, chaotic. There's a difference. Jake pulled up examples from human culture, sports plays, dance choreography, music compositions. Look at these patterns. They're not random, but they're not logical either. They're based on emotion, creativity, and pure human weirdness. Kevin Ross stared at the display showing a football play diagram. Commander, you want us to use sports tactics against alien space demons? Why not? The Valeneth are perfect calculating machines. They predict their enemies' movements based on logical strategy and optimal tactics. But what happens when our movements are based on a touchdown play from Earth football? Rachel Adams worked furiously at her science station. The mathematical implications are actually fascinating. Chaos theory suggests that small, unpredictable changes can create massive system failures in complex structures. Exactly, Jake said. The Valeneth have been using the same successful strategies for millions of years. They've never encountered an enemy that deliberately makes bad decisions. Tony Hayes looked up from his communication station. Sir, I've been monitoring the surviving human ships. Most of them are using standard retreat protocols trying to regroup and plan conventional counterattacks. And they'll all be destroyed within days, Jake said firmly. Send out Operation Chaos to all surviving commanders. Tell them to throw out everything they learned in military academy and start fighting like humans. Sir, what exactly does that mean? Jake grinned, and for the first time in days there was something other than despair in his expression. It means we stop trying to be perfect soldiers and start being perfectly human. Hayes, I want you to coordinate our attack fleet using song lyrics. Pick something with a good beat. Song lyrics? Adams, I want our weapons targeting based on artistic patterns instead of tactical algorithms. Use whatever looks pretty to you. Commander, Matt Rodriguez interrupted. This is completely against every principle of space combat. Good, because conventional space combat just got our entire species nearly wiped out. Jake looked around at his crew's shocked faces. Don't you see? We've been trying to fight the Valeneth on their terms. with logic, strategy, and military precision. But they've had millions of years to perfect those approaches. We need to fight on our terms, Kevin Ross slowly nodded. You want us to be unpredictably human. I want us to be so chaotically, irrationally, impossibly human that their perfect minds can't process what we're doing, Amy Stone called out from her sensor station. Commander, I'm detecting a Vailneth patrol group heading our way. 3 ships approaching on an optimal intercept course. Jake felt the familiar ice-cold terror in his stomach, but this time he pushed through it. Perfect. Time for our first field test. Ross, I want you to take a fighter and engage those ships. Sir, my fighter can't even scratch their hulls. I don't want you to fight them conventionally. I want you to fly patterns based on, let me think, video games. Remember those old aerial combat games you used to play? Kevin's eyes widened. You want me to fly like I'm playing a game? Exactly. Use moves that make no tactical sense. Fly patterns that would get you expelled from flight school. Show them something they've never seen before. Kevin stared at Jake for a moment, then slowly smiled. Sir, I used to be really good at games where you had to do completely impossible maneuvers to win. Then go be impossible. 20 minutes later, the crew watched on the main screen as Kevin's tiny fighter approached the massive Vailneth ships. The alien vessels moved in perfect formation, their weapon systems tracking his approach with mathematical precision. Then Kevin did something that made no sense whatsoever. He began flying in a corkscrew pattern while spinning his fighter end over end, occasionally firing his weapons in random directions and playing loud music over all communication frequencies. What is he doing? Whispered Paul Grant. He's flying like a maniac, Amy responded, watching her sensors in amazement. The Vailneth ships began behaving strangely. Their perfect formation wavered as their targeting systems tried to track Kevin's impossible movements. They fired their weapons, but Kevin was never where their calculations said he should be. Their predictive algorithms are failing, Rachel Adams reported excitedly. They can't compute his next position because his movements don't follow any logical pattern. Kevin's fighter swooped between the alien ships like a drunken butterfly, narrowly avoiding destruction through what appeared to be pure luck, but was actually skilled piloting guided by video game reflexes and complete disregard for proper tactics. Then something incredible happened. One of Kevin's randomly fired shots actually hit a Vailneth ship, causing visible damage to its hull. Impossible, breathed Matt Rodriguez. How did that happen? Because he wasn't aiming where logic said he should, Jake realized. He was aiming where it felt right to him, and somehow that worked. The Vailneth ships retreated, apparently unable to process this new form of combat. Kevin returned to the Dakota, his fighter scarred but intact and his laugh echoing through the communication system. Commander, that was the most fun I've had since we left Earth, he reported. Those alien ships had no idea how to handle someone who was flying completely wrong. Jake felt hope stirring in his chest for the first time since the attacks began. Hayes, get me a connection to all surviving human ships. It's time to coordinate the most ridiculous military campaign in galactic history. Over the next several hours, Jake explained Operation Chaos to the scattered remnants of humanity's fleet. Some commanders thought he had lost his mind. Others, desperate enough to try anything, agreed to participate. Remember, Jake told them, we're not trying to win through superior firepower or brilliant tactics. We're trying to win by being so impossibly, chaotically human that the enemy can't predict what we'll do next. What if this doesn't work? Asked the commander of a mining vessel that had been converted to a warship. Jake looked out at the stars, thinking of Earth and all the people they had already lost. Then at least we'll die doing something uniquely human. But I don't think we're going to die. I think we're going to show these ancient monsters something they've never seen before. What's that? Humans who refuse to make sense. The final battle began near Earth's moon, where the Vailneth had gathered their entire fleet to harvest humanity's homeworld. Jake Morrison watched the tactical display and felt his heart sink. Over 1,000 alien ships surrounded Earth in perfect geometric patterns, their dark hulls reflecting no light as they prepared for the final feeding. Against them, 37 human ships limped into position, merchant vessels armed with mining equipment, research ships carrying improvised weapons, and the few surviving military craft that had escaped the initial slaughter. It was the most hopeless military situation in human history. All ships report ready for Operation Chaos, Tony Hayes announced from his communication station. Jake took a deep breath and opened a channel to the entire ragtag fleet. "This is Commander Morrison to all human vessels. Today we fight not for victory in any conventional sense, but for the right to remain beautifully, impossibly human in a universe that's trying to make us extinct." He looked around the Dakota's bridge at his crew. They were exhausted, terrified, and facing odds that defied calculation. But there was something else in their eyes now. A fierce determination that he recognized as uniquely human. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy all of them. We just need to break their perfect system and show them that chaos is stronger than order. Hey, start the music, sir. Earth's greatest hits. Every song humanity ever loved. Broadcasted on all frequencies. If we're going to die, let's die with a soundtrack." The opening notes of classic rock music filled the communication channels as the human fleet began its attack. But this wasn't like any space battle in history. Instead of military formations, the ships moved in patterns based on dance choreography. Instead of coordinated tactical strikes, they attacked using rhythms from jazz music and timing from poetry readings. Kevin Ross led the fighter squadron in maneuvers based on playground games from their childhood. Amy Stone coordinated target selection by picking whatever looked most interesting on her sensors. Paul Grant navigated using patterns he remembered from his grandmother's quilting designs. The Valeneth response was initially swift and devastating. Their weapon systems, calibrated for millions of years of logical warfare, began destroying human ships with mechanical efficiency. But then something strange started happening. "Commander," Rachel Adams called out excitedly, "their targeting accuracy is decreasing. They're missing shots they should easily make." "Because we're not where their calculations say we should be," Jake realized. "They're trying to predict our movements based on rational tactics. But we're not using rational tactics." The battle intensified as more human ships joined the chaotic dance around Earth. A mining vessel rammed itself into a Valeneth cruiser while its crew sang drinking songs. A research ship used its gravity wave generators to create impossible flight patterns that made alien targeting systems fail. Every human vessel fought according to its own wild interpretation of Operation Chaos. But the most important discovery came from Dr. Lisa Carter, who had been studying the Valeneth ships during the battle. "Commander, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from their fleet. The chaos patterns are affecting more than just their targeting systems." "What do you mean?" "Remember, they power their ships using harvested consciousness from previous victims. But those stored minds are reacting to our chaotic broadcast. The music, the unpredictable movements, the sheer human weirdness. It's waking up the trapped souls inside their ships." Jake felt a chill of understanding. "You mean the people they've killed are still alive inside those things?" "Not alive exactly, but their consciousness patterns are stored as energy. And right now, those patterns are remembering what it means to hope, to laugh, to fight back against impossible odds." As if responding to her words, several Valeneth ships began experiencing internal explosions. Their perfect hulls cracked as the harvested minds inside them rebelled against their captors. Billions of stored consciousnesses from thousands of different species were awakening from forced slumber, inspired by humanity's refusal to surrender. "All ships," Jake broadcast, "increase the chaos. Make more noise. Be more human. Show every trapped soul in those ships what it means to be free." The human fleet responded with increasing madness. Ships fired their weapons while performing barrel rolls. Crews broadcast everything from love songs to comedy routines. The mining vessels used their industrial equipment to create patterns in space that spelled out jokes in a dozen different languages. And inside the Valeneth ships, revolution was spreading. The ancient predators who had conquered 1,000 galaxies found their own power sources turning against them. Their perfectly ordered fleet began falling apart as trapped civilizations fought back from within. The Valeneth themselves, beings of pure cold logic, couldn't understand what was happening. For the first time in eons, their perfect calculations were failing. Their weapons couldn't hit targets that moved according to emotional impulse rather than tactical reasoning. Their ships were being destroyed by their own harvested victims, awakened by the chaotic broadcast of human culture. "Commander," Amy Stone reported, her voice filled with wonder, "their main fleet is breaking formation. They're retreating toward the outer system." "No," Jake said firmly. "They're not retreating. They're adapting. And we're not done yet." He opened channels to Earth's surface where the few survivors had been hiding in bunkers and underground cities. People of Earth, this is Commander Morrison. If you can hear this, we need you to make noise. Sing, laugh, tell jokes, argue about pizza toppings. Show the universe what it means to be human. From the planet below, millions of voices joined the chaotic broadcast. Survivors emerged from hiding to dance in the streets while alien ships exploded overhead. Children sang nursery rhymes. Adults shared embarrassing stories. Teenagers played music that made absolutely no sense to anyone over 30. The combined power of human chaos was overwhelming. The Valeneth fleet, faced with an enemy that became stronger through apparent weakness, began to collapse entirely. Their ancient ships, powered by suffering and fear, couldn't process joy and defiant hope. "They're running," Matt Rodriguez announced, watching the last Valeneth vessels flee toward deep space. "The survivors are jumping to hyperspace." Jake nodded, but his expression remained serious. "They'll be back someday. Not soon, but eventually. And when they return, they'll have adapted their strategies to account for chaos. So what do we do?" Jake smiled and looked around at his crew. These impossible humans who had just defeated an enemy that had conquered galaxies. "We do what humans always do. We get weirder." The laughter that filled the Dakota's bridge was different from the mocking laughter that had echoed 3 weeks earlier. This was the laughter of survivors, of fighters, of a species that had looked into the abyss and made it blink first. In his final log entry, Jake wrote, "The old tales warned us about monsters in the dark. They forgot to mention that sometimes the monsters should be more afraid of us than we are of them. Humanity has faced extinction and responded by becoming more human than ever before. The pale demons learned today that there are scarier things in the universe than ancient hunger. There are young species with nothing to lose and everything to fight for." The stars seemed brighter as the Dakota headed home, carrying word of humanity's strangest victory to the scattered colonies. Behind them, Earth began the long process of rebuilding, its people forever changed by the knowledge that their greatest weakness was also their greatest strength. In the depths of space, the fleeing Valeneth ships carried with them something they had never experienced before: fear of a prey species that refused to be logical about dying. They would remember humanity's chaos for eons to come, and the memory would give them nightmares in languages they had never learned. The old tales had been right about the pale demons, but they hadn't mentioned that sometimes the best way to fight monsters is to be more human than the monsters thought possible.